And I know you've shared both of your stories with us earlier today, but I think that they're remarkable, knowing like how your family came here. I mean, Ricardo, the story you shared with your mom, and I don't know if that's something you guys feel comfortable sharing on the podcast, but I would love it because I just think, I mean, when you shared it, the stories are touching and they're so inspiring.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
So who wants to start? Because my story is boring. I was born in Davis County, and I've lived in Davis County.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah. You're good, bro.
I'm really struggling.
You're good. All right.
Well, first off, thank you, Nick and Dalton, for having us out to even have this conversation.
Yeah.
I know you said that, you don't necessarily make it thematic and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's why we feel even more honored that you would want to spend this time where you can get to know us a little better and we can get to know you better as well. So I'm Ricardo Whyte. I'm an addiction psychiatrist, and my story starts back in the Republic of Panama. So I can remember my mother telling me the story of how she was stillborn, and the nurse midwife coming to her mother and just saying, "Hey, your baby didn't make it." And my grandmother, although she's a pretty nice person, but somewhat forceful when necessary, was like, "Nah, try again." And her then taking that breath and that beginning her life. Mom didn't have the easiest life. She, met my dad, and for whatever reason, they kind of parted companies, and they parted companies when he was in the process of coming to the U.S. to make a life for us. And so now it falls on my mom to now come to the U.S. to make a life for us. Us is me and my older brother at the time. He's about 3 years older than me. So I want you to just see the picture of this young lady coming from a big family, Panama, people living together, and having to leave and come to this country, knows nothing about it, being by herself in many ways, dealing with the winter. Panama is from, tropical to snow. Just isolated, relationship, just kind of falling apart, and forging ahead, positioning herself to eventually being able to send for us, so that we could then come to the U.S. And
so she came to the U.S. and you guys were at home with her parents, siblings.
Exactly, parents. Exactly.
Wow. How long was she gone before she could send for you?
I was 3 when she left and 7 when she sent for us.
Wow. Those are some formative years to be.
Special years, because that was the first time now I saw a 2-parent family in the person of my grandfather and my grandmother.
Mm.
So even though I grew up in a single-parent home, I still got to see what it looks like. My grandfather was larger than life. Why do I say that? So he's working on the Panama Canal, and he eventually retires. So the reason you have black people in Panama is because you have people migrating from the Caribbean, Jamaica, Barbados, coming to Panama to work on the canal. And he's one of the people that did that, or at least his ancestors. But he could do everything. With my grandfather, I don't care if you were sitting on a boat, there's a right way to sit on a boat and a wrong way to sit on a boat. Dude, I'm not playing.
And we've lost that now, I think.
If you're sweeping, stop. You're doing it wrong. There's a right way to sweep and a wrong way to sweep. But
No A for effort.
No.
No
All
trophy
the dirt
prizes
should be in front of you. It's just a science. But the thing was, he was great. This is a man who understood, electric, because in Panama you're on your own, especially in the countryside. So his ability to build things, his ability to just take care of the land, he just showed me what greatness looked like, and taking your discipline seriously. And And so we left, at 7. Mom sends for us, and then the adventures in New York start.
Yeah, you go right to Brooklyn?
We went right to Brooklyn.
Wow.
We landed in JFK. I remember us, my mom having jackets, and we're like, what do we need those for?
Yeah, jeez.
What are
What are we gonna do with that?
Yeah.
What is it? Seeing snow on the ground for the first time. It's just such a shock. Just such a shock. I remember us going to PS 262. I can still see it. I remember my brother and I looking at each other as we're seeing these kids fighting and running. And, this is the 1980s, peak of the crack epidemic. And before you know it, we were running right alongside them.
Yeah.
But it was quite an adventure.
I
Quite an
bet.
adventure. Yeah.
I bet. And when you were in Panama, were you in a busy city? Were you?
No, we were in the countryside.
You were in the countryside.
We're in the countryside.
Oh, wow.
So it's not only a new country.
Yeah, so you're
it's
like
not,
Panama to Brooklyn, day one. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, and the weird thing is, if you asked us, you would say we were poor, right? But the land was a peninsula, and it was almost like a retreat. Like if you were rich and you bought, this is what you would buy. I mean, it was water on 3 sides, tons of tropical fruit trees. It was like a paradise for a little kid to grow up. Snakes and armadillos and all kind of exotic animals.
You lost me at snakes.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
Me too.
I mean,
Yeah.
But
I once had a really cool dude show me a video of a fake snake landing on a man in a hammock. Dude, he showed me this earlier today. The guy's like laying on the beach in a hammock and they drop a fake snake on him. And 30 seconds of chaos ensues where this guy's like,
He can't get out of it.
he's rolling in the hammock.
That's mean, dude.
It is mean, but it was a funny video.
Yeah, absolutely. That's way funny.
it's crazy.
Yeah, that's
But
hilarious.
but yeah, I mean, so it's interesting how sometimes when you look back on your life, you're like, that played a role I didn't realize it was playing until now. I look back on it and see it in a different perspective.
That's interesting.
Wow.
What a cool story to see that your grandpa and then your mom are making sacrifices for their children and their children's children. And I think you hear about that and it's like, it's one thing, but then to experience it, that takes a lot of courage and bravery from your mom.
Well, it's almost like if you're really going to do something amazing, find something outside yourself that's motivating you. It's like if I asked you, hey, man, how's your energy level right now? You'd probably be like, it's okay. It's so-so. But if you saw somebody approaching your daughter right now, your energy would be through the roof.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if we can find those motivators, that's when it really, so just us, she was motivated to face danger, face fatigue, face failure even. And it's a powerful lesson in life that, sometimes, hey, I wonder if it's time to examine what's motivating me and maybe identify something that like a locomotive could help me take on some of these fears that I have.
So I've been down this rabbit hole on TikTok lately of all of the sales bros and entrepreneur, like hardcore guys, like Hormozy. And have you seen Elliot?
It's bropreneurs.
Have you seen Elliot?
Oh, Andy Elliott. Oh, bro,
Oh.
I got a great story for you about him, specifically when you're done.
Okay.
I got a great one, dude.
But he is like, if you don't have a 6-pack, you can't work for my company.
What a great. Did you see my comment on that video?
He's such a douche. And he like will literally ask someone, can you hit $1 million in sales this year? And the guy will be like, I don't think so. I did,
Probably
150,000 last year. I don't know if I could 10X. And he's like, what if I told you that your entire family was going to be killed if you didn't do $1 million this year? Would you find a way to do $1 million? And the guy's like, yeah, I guess. And he's like, yeah, it's in you. You just got to like find the motivation,
Yeah, dude.
And he takes it to such an
Extreme.
extreme level that is just absurd. But the real life example that you said of just like your mom being willing to experience failure, your mom willing to put herself outside of herself. Like those are the real moments that I think this Andy Elliott is trying to get to. He's just doing it in the most like tacky,
way.
trashy way possible. But even on a small scale, my grandpa, who I was telling you a lot of this stuff in this room is his, I remember he always told me, if you could go to work with the same energy and enthusiasm on day 300 that you walked in on day 1, you'll be successful. You just got to find that motivation and that energy. And so I think there's much better realistic ways to get to the point that Andy Elliott is making. But to see people like showing up on day 300 with the same energy is still so far from this idea of, I'm going to move from Panama to Brooklyn without my kids and then send for them 4 years later. Like, I mean, you must have, I mean, I can't imagine the admiration and the like gratitude that you have for your mom.
You know, it's funny because my brother and I enjoy making fun of my mom.
You only make fun of people you like. That's why I never tease Dalton.
We love making fun of mom. We love even complaining of mom. But at some point, we stop laughing and we say, props to that woman. Props to that woman. We are unified in our admiration and appreciation and recognition for what she made possible. So yeah, deep admiration for her. Definitely value what my grandfather exemplified. I think a lot of times, if a man loses a job, for example, he sometimes is made to feel in the society like he can't provide for his family. What I think my grandfather showed me was that there's so much more you provide more than your paycheck. So much more. His legacy really comes from his example. And I assure you, I value providing a paycheck and resources. But it's just that when times get hard, that's when you really get a platform to teach. That's when you really, because there are a lot of things you can teach your kids. The most important, though, is what do you do when times get rough? What do you do when you don't feel like it? Now,
how do you act?
What's that?
And how do you act?
And how do you act? Who are you? Who are you? I'm glad you said something. Now the conversation is really going to get interesting.
But I do want to ask,
But
you got to put it a little closer so we can hear, but I do want to hear your story. But I want to go back because I'm thinking about, you and I share that we're now raising an adult children.
Yes. Yeah.
And like in one sense, I'm thinking about, my gosh, the level of courage and bravery that your mom had to go. But then on the other side, I think of myself as a father to a 19-year-old daughter, a 20-year-old daughter, thinking about her coming to me going, Dad, I want you to watch after my kids until I don't know when. And I'm going to move from Panama to Brooklyn, and I'm going to try to do this. There's a part of me that feels like I might be like, hey, stay here and like, I got you. Like I can still be your dad in that setting. I can help, I can't imagine how hard that had to be for your grandpa to see his daughter leave. But also at the same moment, like he had to be so proud of her for stepping outside of that comfort zone.
It's interesting. Recently, my mom celebrated her 75th birthday. And I don't know why it works out that way, but now the conversations are getting more serious. They're getting more real. They're getting more truthful. And the story is not as romantic, as I would like it to be. She shared that, when she initially told him that, it was sort of like, I remember her saying, it's almost like he was like, so you're just going to leave them with me? Now, this is my hero. The notion that we would have been thought of as a burden, right? And she was in another room and she was kind of crying. And this is what I really value. He came to her and he said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It takes a big man to
You
apologize.
have nothing to worry about. They will be safe with us. And I'll tell you, we were safe with him. I'm a psychiatrist today, right? There are so many of my patients that did not enjoy safety when they were kids. So many. He gave us that. He gave us that. So the story, it's not always as romantic and as clean as you would like, but even in the midst of fear, it's powerful when we emerge and we make the right decisions.
Well, and I think it's those moments that maybe don't seem as romantic that actually make the story much more beautiful in the long run.
The truth.
To see that maybe he stumbled for a minute. Maybe he had questions about the burden, or maybe he had questions about his daughter abandoning, or, and doubting her abilities. But then to come back and be able to, I don't know, rewrite that moment is just beautiful, I think.
But it's so much easier to identify with, because it's just like you started to say. I would have questions. Imagine your daughter just saying, well, take care of these kids.
Yeah, that'd be wild.
Like, I've done my taking care of kids. I've gone through my cycle. I want to enjoy my life now,
Yeah.
I would have some questions, technically speaking. Now, the romantic side of me, I would like to say, you bring 100 kids, they're my grandkids, that's the romance. But the truth is, we are sacrificing to enjoy some aspect of our life. Our wives are looking to us like, this is going to pay off somehow. And so that other aspect of the story, the more truthful aspect of the story, is like, I can see why he would do that. It's like, now I know you're telling me the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It does feel more truthful that way, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and you look at even just culturally, the heroes that are created for cinema and books, and they all have those moments of weakness. They all have those moments of doubt and low points. And I think that's why you end up rooting for them.
Well, I think
you
it's
want
like
to see them come.
humanity,
Yeah.
right?
Because
Like,
we have those
who's gonna
moments of
say,
weakness.
Yeah.
Like, I want to take care of these 2 kids. No, I mean, it's not like everybody's jumping at that opportunity.
Yeah. Especially if one of them's Ricardo.
I think I was the problem.
3-year-old Ricardo was a handful, I bet.
Oh, man.
Okay, so Suranee, we want to hear your story too, because it's so different, and I mean, there's a lot of similarities,
Yeah.
but I think it's also something people will love to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it is uncanny how many similarities there are, and I feel like we learn it more the longer we work together, that there are these things that happen. So my parents, I was born in Sri Lanka. I was just shy of 3. No, I just turned 3 when we moved here. So my parents, so my mom was 14 when she met my dad, and he was 19, and they started dating. And back then in Sri Lanka, I think it was like, you get
It's
married
probably
young.
culturally, kind of like South America with that tradition of
Yeah, and I think he was friends with someone on her street, and they all would hang out together, and he got to know my mom, and so my dad is a hard worker, so he actually lost his parents. I can't remember which one went first, mom or I think it was his mom. I should know this. He was 18 when one died and 20 when the other died.
Oh, that's too young.
Yeah, so he was young, and
young.
he has 4 siblings, so there were 5 of them, and they stayed with my aunt, his aunt and uncle, who we call aunt and uncle now, but they kind of grew up having to fend, that young adulthood, fend for themselves. So my dad would work, and he got a job on the tea plantation, and this is I wove in part of this story earlier, but so he used to, and I love hearing my dad tell this story, but he had a motorcycle, and so he would ride up to the tea plantation.
Yeah.
Riding a motorcycle in Sri Lanka, your dad's a badass.
In the mountains, and
Yeah,
it's
let's
crazy. But so he would.
Husband's got a lot to live up to. Dad just like mobbing around on a
There's
mountain
one
in Sri
picture
Lanka.
when they had my sister, where she's sitting in between them on the motorcycle. Like in Sri Lanka.
Hey, that's how it goes.
There we go. All right.
But he tells a story about how, he would drive hours for work, go and work, and drive hours to come back and see my mom. But he wouldn't always get to see her. So he would like leave a note for her. Wow. He would drive hours to do this. And there was a story about how like he would hide, because he was older, right, than her, like by 5 years, which at that age seems like a lot.
Sure.
So he would have to like hide his notes in like newspapers, and then like she would have to pick them up from like a meeting spot. But he would drive all these hours just to see her.
So he's this badass on a motorcycle mobbing through, and he's a romantic, like wooing.
That's it.
Secretly wooing his.
I know, and it's just so cute because they still
got a lot of room to
they've been
grow,
married.
Dalton.
I know, dude.
And they've been married 43 years now. They just celebrated their 43rd wedding anniversary, and it's just like so cool because you still see my dad like joking around with my mom, and like they still have that element of that young love still. I mean, my mom like shoos them away, but it's still, I mean, it's just so cool to see. But I was saying it earlier, my dad has this hardworking mentality with work, but it's also there with family and marriage. And so it's just for both of them, it's been such an amazing example. But yeah, so then they got married, and then they had my sister. So she's 2.5 years older than I am. And then shortly, I was about 3, and they decided there was a lot of political turmoil in Sri Lanka, and so they decided they were going to move here. But at the time, my dad had moved up in the tea plantation. Now he's the superintendent of the tea plantation, which is like head honcho.
Yeah.
And they had, everything, like everything was done for them. They had cooks and drivers and servants, and it was a really nice life. Like I remember my mom saying that if they had wanted, there were like, they called them servants, but maids, to like take care of the babies, right? Like you don't even have to do anything. But my mom didn't want to do that, and so she was very much involved. But I remember her saying even my dad would change our diapers, which is like unheard of. Like even in Sri Lankan culture, like the man goes to work and does these things. But even when we were little, my dad was really involved with me and my sister. But anyway, back to the story. I feel like I have so many tangents.
No, I like this. And I just love your dad.
Yeah.
I
Like,
know.
my gosh.
Both of them are awesome.
It's complicated.
Yes, he has many layers. Yeah. And it is funny to see like which aspects of me I see in my like from my dad and which ones are from my mom, which is really cool. But definitely I would say me and my dad are much more stubborn, but also very logical. And so I definitely get that from him. And kind of like hard-headed, but in terms of like direction, like just very steadfast. But so they decided when we were young that they were going to move here because there was a lot of political turmoil in Sri Lanka. So they left everything. Like they left their families. And my mom was 25-ish.
Wow.
And so you were talking about parents, right? Like leaving. So when we left, that was the last time she got to see her dad.
Wow.
Because he passed away before we were able to go back to visit.
Yeah.
And then we visited when I was 7, and then her mom passed away shortly after that. So it's like she missed out on this time with her parents, and my dad, they had other family that they left. But when they came here, his job didn't translate, right? So superintendent of a tea plantation doesn't have
Not a lot
an
of tea
equivalent
plantations.
here.
Yeah.
But he knew that he had to provide for us. So he worked like 4 jobs when we were little. So he worked at Target. He worked at Payless Shoe Store. He worked at a bank. And then I think there was another one that he did part-time. But like he was working night shifts and day shifts. And like he just worked all the time. And then my mom worked part-time also at a bank. But she was the one that like got us ready for school. My dad would help if he was there in the morning. But like she managed the drop off. My sister has a learning disability, so she was at a different school. So my mom had 2 drop offs, and then she would go to work part time, and then she'd have 2 pickups, get us home, get us ready if we were in extracurriculars or things like that. You know, they would manage all of that. But especially as a parent, like I have 1 kid, and it's like, you know, easy. We have a lot of resources and help and things like that. And I'm thinking, man, to manage these 2 kids in a foreign country, right? Like they don't know California from Sri Lanka. And like we started school pretty much right away. And so they had to manage, you know, getting jobs in a new country and putting us in school and managing. I mean, I just think about moving my daughter. We were thinking about maybe moving her school. And then I was thinking, oh, but then I have to learn this new system. And I'm like, they learned like a new life.
Everything.
A language, I can.
Have you talked to your parents about like the emotional, I don't know, I think there's a level of humility that comes with that. Like this is a pathetic example in comparison, but I worked at Zoomies for a decade. And I realized I'd hit a ceiling unless I wanted to move to Washington. No disrespect to Washington, but like I'm not moving to Washington. And I didn't want to be in retail anymore. So I spent a long time trying to get a job, and no one wanted to hire someone who worked in retail. It didn't matter that I had 400 employees at the time, or was managing $40 million in revenue, or, you know, building corporate training for 10,000 employees. It didn't matter. They were just like, well, you work at a skateboard shop. Like, no, I'm not going to hire you. So then I ended up taking a job that I believed was going to pay off, but it paid me less than half. And I had to go get other side jobs at night. And I would leave my one job and I would go work night jobs. And one of the night jobs I got was reffing indoor. Pretty flexible hours, late at night, cash, no taxes, like it helped, right? So I went and applied at the one furthest away from my house because I was so embarrassed at the thought of
running into people,
and they're like, why are you a 30-year-old indoor ref? Like, what's going on, you know? Yeah. And then they transferred me to the one close to my house, and I had to ref like teams that I'd played on and kids that I'd gone to high school with, and it was, I can look back on it now and I'm proud that I made that sacrifice. But in the moment, I literally was driving further away so no one would know me. Like your parents having maids and staff and drivers and then going to LA and working at Payless and Target. Yeah. Did you ever see that from your dad, or have you talked to him since about it?
We haven't talked about that aspect, but I think my dad, above all else, it was like, well, I need to do what I need to do to make it, right? Like my dad has never been one of those people who's thought about appearances or what somebody else might think. He's and this has been since we were little, and it's really crazy because it's like this is such a deep conversation. I've never had a conversation like this with my dad. Like, I'm a psychologist, but we do not talk about feelings in our house. At all. And even when I went to tell my parents I was getting my PhD in psychology, they were very proud of me for getting my doctorate, but I don't think the psychology part was like, it was just,
they're like, look, you want to go into dental? You can put your hands in people's mouths. Yeah. That'd be better.
And it wasn't even, the crazy thing is like, it wasn't even like they were like saying, oh, I should do something like medical or law or anything like that. It was just like, we just didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just very strange. But that aspect of humility, I think my parents both, if they ever felt that way, I would never have known.
Oh,
I hope my kids wouldn't know. I even remember, so I had left Zoomies and I went to Skull Candy, and I was head of a global department, still making half of what I was, struggling to get by. So much so that I had to have my parents go get me a cell phone. And it was when smartphones were out. It was 2010. but because it was my parents, I was like, just buy me a flip phone. And then I'm traveling and everyone's like, I'll drop a pin, I'll do this. And I'm like, I got to go MapQuest and print this thing.
Yeah.
No idea where I'm at. My phone would ring and people would be like, are you going to answer it? And I'd be like, no, because I didn't even want to pull my phone out and have people be like, why is this dude rocking a... And I'm embarrassed that I was embarrassed.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and that's 15 years later, but I would think it would be... There had to be a moment, and maybe I'm just projecting, but you go from that lifestyle in Sri Lanka...
Yeah.
That had to be so
I mean, you
hard.
would think,
Yeah, that would be-
for
that would
sure.
be-
And if not, then just superpower.
I mean, I'm sure at
Goodness.
some level, but I think it was. We have this saying where, like, in our membership and stuff, when we're talking about, like, if you're worried about what other people are thinking, you're not focused enough on what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And I think my dad was just so focused that.
It didn't even
He didn't have time or energy. My mom too. Like they were hustling. They were trying to raise
Make
us
money,
and build a life for us. And
And sometimes I think it's easier to see in other people.
yeah,
Like my wife's brother had worked at a bank. And I don't remember, something happened. I don't remember. His manager was real kind of funky. On the spot, just fired him.
Wow.
He had a wife, he had a set of twins and another set of twins on the way. And he didn't come home. And I was like, where is he? And it got fairly late, and then he called and he told his wife, hey, this happened. She's like, well, where the heck have you been? He's like, well, I got another job and I was going through orientation. And he walked next door to the Burger King and he flipped burgers. And it's one of I'm so proud of him for that, and I'm inspired by that. And he did that for he worked at Burger King a year or more. He had other jobs, but he like used that one to help kind of keep him on track and moving. And I always thought, like, he's a man. He is a dad. He is a husband. He is doing whatever it takes, and he's pushing that ego aside. And I've always loved him, but I respected him at such a high level for it. But it's ironic that when the reverse, I was embarrassed for myself. I don't know.
But you said you were embarrassed that you were embarrassed.
now.
Now I'm embarrassed that I was
right,
embarrassed.
right.
But back then it was just like, oh, please, nobody show up that I know. Please, 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 please.
But you know, the funny thing about it is, if I were doing something that I felt was, I'm just going to use the word demeaning. Gotta do a quick qualifier. Work is dignified. Just got to qualify that.
Yeah.
Okay. But let's say I'm misdirected and I'm feeling embarrassed. You know, even though I know the significance of what I'm doing, there's no point in denying the emotions. You know, demeaning is demeaning. Like, if you're working in a situation where you don't have autonomy, just autonomy. If you're working in a situation where you have to be, you have to deal with people's disgust, disdain, contempt, not pleasant, and there's no amount of lying to yourself that's going to make it pleasant. The reality, though, is I'll pay that price. I'll pay the price. This is humiliating. I'll still do it, though.
Yeah.
I'll still do it. Because part of it is honoring who we are as humans, honoring our emotions. I think the problem becomes when it's almost as if we're going to deny the emotion, and if there's pain there, then I can't move forward. No, I'll acknowledge that there's pain. I still have to do what I have to do as a man. I'll acknowledge the pain.
Yeah.
I think that's beautifully said. It makes me think that my 13-year-old son had done soccer his whole life, and he was so cerebral when he played. he was more afraid of making a mistake than doing, making the move. Loves the sport, loves the like vision of it. He's wicked smart when it comes to it. And soccer is a very intelligent sport, right? But he decided, I'm done. I want to try something else. I want to try something that my team doesn't rely on me for. I want to get into cross country. Look at me. Like, I'm not a runner. He's not built like me, but he's a Stagge. He's got thick legs. Like, so he goes out, and he's never run before. He goes out and he's running, and his first race, dead last. And me and my wife are just like, there were like 100 kids in this race. How's he going to do? And he comes across the finish line, taps his watch, and he's like, got my record. Awesome. And I'm like, yo, I'm raising like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
dude, you got your record. Like,
Yeah.
let's go get ice cream,
Yeah.
I'm so competitive. I probably would have stopped running. I probably would have like, nah, F this, I'm out.
Yeah.
But then it got even more crazy. The next race he's running, and it's with more kids and younger kids. He comes in second to last, and at the last minute, that he was third to last, the last little bit, a kid that's like 8 years old, looks like he could barely, like, no physical reason that my son should not outrun this kid. They turn the final corner, and this kid just smokes my son. And everyone's like cheering him on, like, oh my gosh, look at the little kid go. Like, and I'm just thinking, this is the moment. This is the moment, Hendricks. Hendricks runs across, taps it. God, beat my record again. Cool. And I'm like, okay, you're getting that from your wife.
Yeah.
Run with it. Like, let it go, dude. Because it's neat to see that he has that mindset and mentality. And he's literally not, like you said, he's more focused on him and his output and what he's doing. And at 13, that's pretty freaking mature, I think. I've been just so inspired by him with that.
It's like revolutionary. It's like
It
we live
is.
in this culture where you finish school in 4 years. You get married at 25. You get this, and there are all these rules rather than us recognizing we're running our own race. Where the record is what you say it is. Like, we have individual, parameters. And it's not to say to be slack or, what have you, but it's sometimes some tunnel vision would be helpful and have some respect for your course, your challenges, your difficulties and not being distracted by this other person, because it can be a distraction in the other way as well. Well, look, I'm running faster than this kid. Why are you looking at that? You're supposed to be way up there. It's your race. It's your race. So I think that's awesome. I wonder if he didn't get that from you, Nick.
I know. I was
I don't
just
think
going
he
to
did.
say.
I don't think he did. I'm telling you.
But maybe not directly, but from what you teach him, right? Because there has to be that in your in your household, like championing what he's doing, because kids are a product of their environment. So he has to have gotten that.
He does have one awesome mom. I'll tell you that much.
We've met you, Nick. You're a pretty cool
thank you.
guy. I'm sure you had something to do with
We do
that.
try really hard with our kids to make it about them.
Yeah.
And like each one is on their own path. And, having 4 kids, you recognize like what my 19-year-old did at 16 is different than what my 17-year-old did when she was 16 is different than what my 13-year-old is going to do when he's 16. And that's fine. And like, let's just be cool with that. And let's celebrate who they are. And maybe to an extreme, I've tried to make things more about them. I love my parents so much, but sometimes I felt like as a child and even as an adult, when my mom would tell me that she loves me, somehow it felt like it was more about her than it was about me. It was how much she loved me. It was,
She's
and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. That I love that my mom told me and tells me that she loves me. But there were times where it like almost felt like it was more about proving how much she loved me than. I've never questioned how much she loves me. She's like, and I love her. But I specifically have tried to make this focus with my kids. Every night when I tuck my 8-year-old Theo in, I ask him, what's the most important thing for you to know? And his answer is the same every night. I've drilled this in his head. And he says, I'm loved. And so I've just tried to flip the Theo, I love you to say, Theo, you are loved. It is about you. And then I ask him, what is the second most important thing? And he goes, I'm important. And it's like, yep. And that's how he goes to bed every night. So we do try to celebrate each person and make it about them. And, you know, I think as a parent, I probably mess up a lot more than I do right. But I think that there's real value in that.
Well, the funny thing in the story is it's not like when he crosses the finish line, he's looking around to see what your judgment's going to be. He's like, I beat my record. It's this
I'm more looking around like, I'm okay with it, but are you?
Yeah,
You're ready to support. But
Yeah.
but clearly you've built into him, no man, it's what you say. It's what you say. And he's not asking you, so what do you think, Dad?
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like he already knows what you think.
Yeah.
It's like you've drained it into him. That's awesome.
Oh, that's a good thought.
Yeah.
I like that. It's interesting how you learn the good things from your parents, and there's so many great things I've taken from mine, and I'm sure you have from yours. And then there are things that you learn that you want to change, and it doesn't even mean that the things you're changing are because what your parents said was necessarily bad.
Yeah, some of it was.
Certainly.
But I think the idea of resilience, right? It's like where you want to raise your kids to work hard, but how do you pair, like you want to give them everything, right? You want to give them a good life, but you also want them to know how to do it for themselves. And I think that's this balance of like what we've grown up with and how do you instill it going forward, and knowing that each kid is different, right? Like you have 4 kids. I'm sure they're all quite different.
Yes.
And it's like figuring out what works with your kid. My husband and I were saying the other day, like, man, mine is pretty soft. Like, we got to toughen up this kid. So she started jujitsu.
And my daughter does jujitsu.
And we thought she was going to hate it, right? We thought like, okay, we're going to have to really, you know, commit. Like she has to put in a good 2 months before we even talk about whether we're continuing or not. She loved it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, she cried for the first 5 minutes when she saw them doing the moves, and she was like, is it going to hurt?
Yeah.
And they explained to her how it worked. But like, I was shocked. Like they paired her up with a little boy to spar.
Yeah.
And this was like her second class. And the professor was like, she's like, yeah, just spar. And Amaya raises her hand. She's like, I don't know how.
Yeah.
And the professor was like, just try. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And it was crazy to see, like, she's sparring with this boy who's trying to take her down. And I was certain, I would have put money on it that she was going to cry. Not one tear.
Yeah.
And she's like, such a crybaby at home. Like, I was like, this is fantastic.
Well, kids are a lot more resilient than we think they are. Yeah. My daughter does jiu-jitsu, my son does wrestling.
Okay.
And yeah, he cries every practice, but I take that back. He doesn't cry every practice, but he cries most practice. But it's good because I had the same thing. I was like, man, I need to toughen him up a little bit. But I can't do that. So I coached his wrestling. So it's like a nice, because I get to be like dad at home, but then I get to switch a little bit and be coach for a minute. And it's kind of a nice dynamic because then I can leave coach at wrestling and be a dad at home. But when I'm coaching, I have a reason to be like, no. Like, yeah, you can cry. You're going to finish. Like, you got to run. Everybody else is running.
You treat him like any other kid.
We're going to treat
like
like anybody else on the mat, and we're going to get it done. But it's nice. Like, because I get to do both a little bit. I get to be soft at home, but he knows too. Like, there's a switch that we both kind of turn on, right?
Then that's crazy that he knows, right? So he doesn't test it.
Right. So yeah, at home he knows we're fine. At wrestling, like at home, it's like, all right, we can take a break now, or we can do. At wrestling, he knows. Yeah, we're just.
But I just love that concept as parents, seeing something missing and saying, okay, well, let me add something.
Yeah.
I see a deficit. Let me work on that.
Yeah.
I really am admiring, what it is that you're doing with your son, in that, like, these are the things that when you pass on, this is what they talk about.
Yeah.
These are those moments,
Yeah.
That it's like we had special moments. This is when we bonded. My dad taught me how to be a man.
Yeah.
That's precious.
For me too, by the way, and you might feel this in jiu-jitsu, well, maybe we've all felt it, but it's kind of crazy as a parent. I probably learned more at wrestling because the hardest lesson for me as a parent that I had to learn was like, you literally can't do it for them. Like, I cannot run out on the mat and
You're just going to pin some 9-year-old?
Stop the pain. Yeah, exactly. I can't stop the pain. I can't win it for you. You're going to cry. It's going to suck. And there's nothing that I can do.
Totally. My husband was trying to coach Amaya from the sidelines, like, pull her leg out. And the professor came over and told my husband, like, no, you can't talk to her at all. Like, you can't coach from the sidelines. They have to figure it out on the mat.
Yeah. How crazy is that?
How profound, because that's life.
Yeah, that's like, and that was like a big one for me because I was like, oh shit, like you can't do it for them, and they got to learn. And you have to sit there and just like, I got to sit there, and because I know at practice, like, I know both the kids, and I have to coach both the kids, and I'm like, I can't do it for you. Like, I got to sit there and watch you get beat up, and you have to know that I can't help you either. Yeah, kind of crazy. That's crazy.
For me, the deficit that I wanted to address was speech. So most of us, assuming that the neighborhood's not too violent, you're going to get through the day without a fight.
Yeah.
You're going to get through a good 10 years, 20 years without a fight. Maybe you have 1-2 fights. If you're getting in many fights, that's a sign you got to change the location. Time to make some changes.
I lived in the hood of West Point, dude, because I was getting in fights left and right
every day, dude. That's crazy.
But you will not escape having a verbal joust with a person as you go through your day.
For sure.
Sometimes that joust is even with yourself. So we wanted her to learn how to speak, how to advocate for yourself, how to get in that discourse of collecting information and then being able to defend your position, because we felt like those fights are infinite. You got to convince me to stay up. You got to tell that boy not to touch you. You've got to explain your case to the principal. You've got to explain to that employer why you deserve the job, or you've got to close that contract. You will always be using your mouth and your capacity to communicate to create your dreams. So for us, it was speech and debate. And sometimes she loved it, and sometimes she hated it. And we talk about internal drivers. Like, why are you who you are? What from the past? And I remember I came from that generation of be seen and not heard. Be seen and not heard. Like, you're not entitled to speak. Some of it is kind of good, like, listen. Some of it was, but by the same token, God gave you a voice, And so we wanted her to have a voice. We overdid it.
But it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
But if she had a conversation with you right now, she'd have a voice. You would see who she is. And that was important to us because of our internal drivers.
So I love that, by the way. As a fellow debate nerd myself, what was her event?
Her mother would have to tell you all that. I mean, she did it all. I mean, my wife would have to. If my wife was here, she would just rattle it off. But they would do the whole thing.
You guys had us go through an exercise today about skills. Candidly, and I'm not saying this like, woe is me, but I don't carry many like tangible skill sets. I have a couple, but I'm not like overflowing with them, and I realize that. But one of the things that I've had success with is speech. I've publicly gone on tours and publicly, presented. I did debate, and I loved debate. And my debate teacher, Mr. Cutler, and then Mr. Hopkins. Mr. Hopkins had a gap in between his two front teeth. You could probably drive a semi truck through.
Yeah.
And dude, I'm telling you, I loved this man, Dave Hopkins. When 10th grade, I was in debate with Mr. Anderson. He left and went to another school, and Hopkins came in, and I was just like, I'm going to hate this dude. Like, you're not Mr. Anderson. You're the best teacher I've ever had in my whole life. I loved him. Fun, relatable, just a good guy. And learning how to debate and learning how to present a case. A lot of times I think people think, well, I'm good at speaking. I'm good at talking.
Yeah.
I can make an argument. They would get wrecked by people who could listen. Because if you listen, someone is going to paint themselves into a corner. They're going to leave a gap open, and then you pounce on it, and they're gone. They're gone. And I loved debate for that reason. It became, I almost dropped out of soccer, and I was playing like pre-Olympic level because it was conflicting with debate. And I was like, I think I'm choosing debate over soccer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They used to teach rhetoric in schools, and it's kind of sad that they don't anymore.
Yeah.
But like that.
Yeah. We would do one of the events. It was like a joke event if you competed, but they literally just called it SPAR, spontaneous argument. And you'd stand up and it would be you and me, Suri, and they'd be like, all right, Suri, you're pro cats are better than dogs. Nick, you're pro dogs are better than cats. And then you have this format, and you'd go.
Yeah.
And you'd speak for 60 seconds, and then I would, and back and forth, and they'd vote. And it was so fun because when we would practice in class, I'm like, well, I actually believe that dogs are better than cats, so I'm going to take cats are better than dogs.
Wow.
Like I would force myself to try to win on the thing that I didn't believe.
Yeah.
And it just it was like an addiction. I loved it.
Because there's a science to it. So much the way with martial arts, you can get a big person getting manhandled by a smaller person.
That's actually my favorite. That's why my daughter does jiu-jitsu for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We put those hot heads at first day of jiu-jitsu. We have like a purple belt, brown belt girls in our gym. You'll get this ex-college football player who comes in. I can beat up anybody. We're just like, hey, she's 150 pounds. You'll have no work. You'll have no problems. Just mops them. Because, there's a difference between being strong and knowing how to
do it. Yeah.
use the force.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with the science of communication.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you see it too when people have a weaker argument and they start using dirty tactics.
Yeah.
The first sign that, okay, even you don't really believe in your position because now you're having to resort to dirty tactics.
Although, can I say, dirty tactics inside the rule books, I was all for. So
Strategic.
yes,
so
that is.
yes,
that's
so
the name of the
I
game.
did policy, which was one where you had to like research. It was pre-internet and phones and all this crap, so we'd have to print out things. For the whole year, we had like, you're going to debate every time you compete. It's about energy in America, and it was a topic, and then so you'd have to have cases for and against nuclear power, solar power, you name it, and we had to come up with our own plan. Well, a big part of what people would do in policy, and you did it as a pair. So it was like me and my partner Jonathan Van Roo against two other people. And you'd get up and you would present your case, and it was the other team's responsibility to obviously argue it back. Well, it became a very common thing that the other team would argue it back and then be like, look, their case is so pathetic. And in the world of trying to be competitive and to make this a fun debate, we're going to create a counter plan. So you can either defend your plan or you can argue ours. We'll beat you in either one. Wow. So that became really fun, right?
Yeah.
Well, then me and my partner Jonathan and Mr. Hopkins were like, well, what if we as the group presenting a plan beat him to the punch, and we're like, hey, we're going to give you a second plan that you could fight us against. Take your pick, either one.
Yeah.
So in our first plan, we would say something, and you would spew the first time. It was like all about going fast. You'd spew something like, we're going to ban all nuclear energy, and you'd like throw in all these things about how bad nuclear energy is.
Yeah.
And then you'd get up, and then you're like, hey, we're going to create a counter plan because they can't even fight this one.
Yeah.
And our whole plan is about banning nuclear energy. And so we would contradict ourselves between the two plans. And then they'd get up and they'd just be like, nuclear energy is bad for blah, 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 blah. We're going to blah, blah, blah. And then we'd stand up and we'd be like, so in our first case, we talked about banning nuclear energy. Everything you just said applies to our first case. Suck it, we win. And people would just be like,
What just happened?
and then they'd be like, call timeout and like, we got to check the rules. And we crushed people with that tactic.
Dude, that's good.
That's not dirty.
But it was
That's
just like
mastery.
learning
Yeah.
it was learning the things and playing inside it.
Playing
And
the game, yeah.
and I love that. It's
It's good.
I think we've talked about this, but I know he's canceled at some capacity, but Dr. Seuss.
Oh, okay.
He's been canceled for
Okay, for a little bit.
he's had some questionable
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
like defending that.
But I mean,
But-
Dr.
but he-
Seuss,
but he-
like
yeah,
his
but he was a
books.
good
yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, he has written the most famous, popular, best-selling children's book of all time, right? But do you know the story behind how he did it? I'm obsessed with this story. He tried to write a book for 30 years. No one would publish him. So then some like forward-thinking literary minds came to him and they were like, hey, we want you to write a book that first and second graders can't put down. My words, not Dr. Seuss's. I'm paraphrasing, but he was like, yeah, I've tried for 30 years. Like, kindly go F yourself. I don't know how to do this. And they were like, well, no. Like, really, we want you to try it. Here's 215 words that are first grade and second grade vocabulary. We want you to write a book, but you can only use these words. And so we think you could do this, right? We started looking through it and he's like, well, cat and hat. And that's how he wrote Cat in the Hat. So sometimes I think when you give yourself parameters, it actually creates the most creativity. You have to have boundaries to have creativity.
Yeah, then you can make the connections
Yeah.
within those bounds.
Yeah, and you can kind of bend the rules a little. You can play, but when everything is like, let's think blue sky, let's think 30. I'm always like, this is going nowhere. Like I'm
you're not
out.
gonna get
I don't
anywhere,
want
for
that.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
I want there to be some level of structure where I have freedom inside it to be creative because I can be the most creative in that setting.
That's so funny. I'm laughing because this is like a constant discussion between us where he'll come up with an idea and I'll like parse it down and be like, okay, within this, then go, and it's like, I mean, your ideas are phenomenal, but it's just like,
I'll vouch
sometimes
for
they're
that.
too,
Thank you.
I'll vouch
Yeah.
for that.
yes, fantastic ideas, but they're not like, with the bounds, we figure out the way to execute it in a way that everybody can engage with.
Yeah, what's...
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, after you.
I was going to say, what's that law that... didn't it win a Nobel Peace? But if it's... Essentially what they said was, if you give somebody an hour, it'll take an hour. But if you give them 15 minutes, it'll take them 15 minutes. I can't remember what that is.
I mean, that's true just in
But-
workplace meetings.
Work will grow itself into the time allotted.
Yeah, but like, yeah,
It
so...
is
there's
a
like
famous
a
law.
thing.
It is a
Yeah,
famous law.
like-
I know what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Like if you
Yeah.
tell your teenage, if you tell your teenager to clean their room and they don't have any motivation, like if you tell them on
10
Monday,
minutes, it's faster than an hour.
yeah, but if they have a
Yeah.
party in 30 minutes, their room gets cleaned in 30 minutes. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like,
Yeah.
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 yeah, I can't remember what that's called, but yeah, it's essentially kind of like
Yeah.
you know enough, you master the principle enough to break the rules, but that's how you master the principle, right? Like, yeah,
Challenge is a powerful motivator.
yeah,
Challenge is, I mean, like,
Oh, yeah.
you literally saw like a Michael Jordan say, dude, when this is not challenging anymore, I quit. You literally
Yeah.
see him quit. Not because he wasn't great, but it's like, I don't have a challenge anymore. And so, yeah, I mean, she immediately puts down the parameters and it's like, okay, well, we just have to work within these confines. Okay, now you're testing me. Now it's like, because we talked about it this morning where it's like, part of the skill in mastery is you see resources where other people see liabilities.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Just powerful. Like, it's like mastering your discipline allows you, it like unveils opportunities where others are like, no, we can't go forward. A master will say, I see something.
yeah,
I'll take that challenge.
There is something to be said about understanding process and being able to execute it, but then understanding process enough to know when not to execute it.
yeah,
Like
Wisdom.
when I was at Zoomies, when I first started, it was like, hey, here's what we do. We sell as much as we can to as many people as we can. That was the phrase. And I'd be like, okay, well, I'm supposed to teach my staff how to do that. Like, I can do it and this guy can do it, but like that guy can't. But if I could give him steps, he probably could, right? So over time, Zoomies developed 7 steps of selling, GIIPSC. All these years later, I still remember. Greet, initiate a conversation, identify needs and wants, provide pertinent product knowledge, offer alternatives and advice, close the sale. So you're like, okay, there's these 7 steps. And I would have store managers who would learn that. And I remember once during peak season, a customer came in, a new employee's like, hey, how's it going? And my store manager's like, great. We were literally like, how are they selling? It wasn't like, how are they doing with the 7 steps? I was like, let's just watch how they sell and you tell me what you see. This store manager's like, got it, I'm doing the 7 steps. It's going to be great. The sales kid walks up, hey, how's it going? My manager's like, he greeted, cool. He asks a question. Oh, and the customer just goes, I'm good. Hey, I'm looking for a pair of pants. And the sales kid goes, okay, well, what size do you want? Right?
Yeah.
And sorry, that's my time. I got 5 minutes.
Okay. All right.
My store manager like literally walks up and grabs the sales kid, pulls him back, and is like, you missed the 2nd step, which is identify or initiate a conversation. And the sales kid's like, they
just wanted
told
pants.
me what they want pants. Like, what am I going to be like? So what are you going to wear the pants to? Like, it doesn't, my manager had good intentions, but like was so focused on the process that he was not focused on the reason of the process. It's like, you could be like, oh, cool. What size are you and what fit do you like? So what brings you into the mall today other than pants? What do you know, you could do step 3 and then step 2 and it's fine. But sometimes I do think you have to understand step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. But when you really become a master is when you're like, those steps are fluid and I can use them in any sort of order.
Exactly.
Yeah,
like
you know the rules enough to
them.
break them.
Yeah.
You don't have to implement them the same exact way, but you know how to massage it.
Yes, and I think that's part of why I've been so drawn to what the 2 of you are building with the Mastermind Institute and Killing Burnout is not that you don't experience burnout or that you have your own things that you're dealing with, but you 2 are truly masters in this. You're highly educated. You've dedicated your career to it. You sit down and talk to you and you're like, this checks out. This is here. And what you're doing is you're creating a roadmap for people to start following this process. And the process in and of itself, I think, is that you've created and started to share with us is beautiful. And it's so helpful and it's so wonderful. And I would imagine that at some point, going through that process enough and experiencing it enough, I can actually learn that it's not so much a process as it is a state of mind and a way of being, and it's much more fluid. Mm-hmm. But I think that's why I'm so in support of what you're doing and where you're at, and I want to scream it from the rooftops like this has the chance of changing people's lives.
Wow. No, thank you. Thank you for that, Nick. Thank you. It's funny because you were mentioning sometimes you have to have the wisdom to not do a thing. Part of mastery. It's like you'll see people rush in where a master would be like, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. Right. One practical example is I remember doing presentations where you'd be asked the day before, hey, do this presentation X, Y, or Z, and it wouldn't be that big deal. I'd pull it together, it'd be okay. But then subsequently, I've done presentations with her. Oh my goodness. All right, let's think this through. The flow is not good there. Now the flow is better there. And no, we need way. So now we've got nights to think about it. And so now you're honing it. And then you deliver it and you're like, now you get a phone call. Oh, I'm sorry, I need at least 6 months. I need at least 6 months. First of all, I know she won't touch it otherwise. Yeah. And I want her to help me co-create. And second of all, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. No, I have a certain level of respect for my discipline. And if I can't exert it, then I'm going to pass. Yeah. So I love that point.
That's a great point.
That's sick. Yeah, I'm going to start doing that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just like,
yeah, you want me to do it tomorrow? For sure, dude. Whatever.
Yeah. You give me 6 months, I'll probably work on it
I have ADHD.
Day 59.
Yeah, for real, dude. Like the night before. That was my whole master's program.
Whether I have 3 days or 3 years, I'm going to give myself about 3 hours to prep.
But practically speaking, when you work on something and you like burst your brains on it, but then you get a night of sleep.
It's always better
it's always
to
better.
like,
You
you
get
know,
to sit on it,
and then, you know, you go back to it again and you get another night of sleep and you go back to it again. The things that pop in, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Like I've had a few days to prepare for this little speech tonight, and it's gone through like 10 iterations, you know what I mean? But yeah, every time you get back, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I've boiled it down to this, you know? Yeah.
Well, I think what you just said is so important. As a copywriter, I think the very best copywriters understand the principle of addition by subtraction.
Yeah.
Mm.
You're going to
How do you just,
Yes.
does every word on that page serve a purpose? And if it doesn't, get rid of it. Get rid of it, get rid of it, get rid of it.
Yeah.
I used to be a typesetting editor for a newspaper, and it was just like cutting this word, cutting this word, cutting this word. And they're like, what?
The
And I'm
whole
like,
sentence,
read it
yeah.
without it. And then you'd read it and you're like, oh, I didn't miss anything. You're like, yeah, you don't need it.
Yeah.
I can't do that in speech. I just ramble. I'm like the Energizer Bunny. I get going. I can't
That's
stop.
why I have to write my.
But
speeches
written
down.
form,
But I think you also know when and where to do it, right?
maybe
Like,
we'll see.
Well,
I-
but his
like,
words
even-
are so
even-
carefully chosen.
yeah, and like even when you were
Spoken?
saying, oh, if you ask me to do
Chosen,
something
yeah.
tomorrow,
Mm.
it's like for some things, yeah, I could
Yeah.
do it. For other things, no, I need more time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
That's
think
true.
it's just no.
Yeah, I guess it depends on.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some things that it doesn't matter. You could in an hour I could talk on it and be fine. But you know enough to boil it down to 15
Exactly.
minutes.
It's
Yeah,
not
I
like
can-
you're just pulling it out of nowhere.
Yeah,
right?
I know
Yeah.
enough.
But
yeah.
if you listen to Nick,
Oh, totally.
the words are carefully chosen.
Yes.
They're
Most of
they're
the time.
they're
Yeah.
edited.
You have lots of talents.
you're
I just need to clear
Yeah,
this
you're
up.
good.
You have lots
Oh,
of talents.
And
let's
my
edit that
favorite
part
one
out
is
of the
passion.
podcast.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
like if
I
you
think
hang
mine's
with this
connection.
man. I'm sorry.
I think mine's connection.
Yeah.
I like his
You
hunger.
are so easy to connect with. That is
Oh.
a talent.
I don't know if that's on me
Yeah.
or if that's on you guys.
think
I don't
it's,
know.
Well, we were
No,
walking
'cause
down.
I've
there's
also
other
felt like
people.
that with
We were
Dalton.
walking down the street. He's still able to greet people. But this is your hometown.
Well, but yeah, but you
too,
can't
though.
do that.
Okay,
Brooklyn
so we have to
either.
end on something that's not appropriate. The guy that I
Said hi to?
yeah, I'm not going to say his
Yes.
name, Richard Noel.
Yeah.
He was in this light club thing with me, and we in high school, and we went to Snowbird for a retreat, and we were roommates in like this dorm room, basically.
Yeah.
And he was like, dude, do you have any stupid human tricks? And I'm like, I can only snap with my non-dominant hand, and I can write upside down. He's like, those are boring. And I was like, okay, well, you're asking me because you have.
Yeah.
Yes,
He
Clearly.
was like, this is so inappropriate. I apologize specifically to you, Suranee, that I'm saying this. He was like, I have a stupid human trick that I can contort my private part into looking like all sorts of unique things. And then boom, pants come down. He's like, look at this one and 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 and look, I'm just gonna say, it's a for real skill. Like that man is talented.
That's crazy,
You
dude.
have to take back every compliment.
That's a even though you should doesn't, or even though you can doesn't mean you should kind of thing. Like, yeah, no,
Knowing
dude.
the one and
That was one of the funniest experiences.
Yeah, dude,
also,
that's funny.
I bet.
he's laying on the bed and girls are walking by and he'd be like, want to make out? Want to make out? No one would.
Yeah.
And I'm making fun of him.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, let's see if you could do it. Sure enough, Sasha Rambos, who was the co-president of the light club with me, walks by and I was like, want to make out? And she's like, yeah. Turns the lights off and comes in my room. He's like, you son of a bitch. I'll see myself out. So he played a great wingman for me.
There you go. Yeah. Set
Those
it up.
two stories happened within about 65 seconds of one another, too. It was like a pretty magical moment for me. Super
That's
formative.
hilarious.
Yeah, very much.
All right,
so.
I got to go
with
jump
that-
on this
Thank you
call.
guys
With
for
that,
having us.
we're-
Thank
Yeah,
you for being
thank
on
you guys
this.
so much.